Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the People of Penn State podcast. I'm Ryan Jones, the Interim Executive Officer here at the Penn State Alumni Association. Excited to be joining you today with a guest. He's a 2005 College of Engineering alum, and he also has an MBA from Penn State from 2007. Mohan Sivaloganathan. He is the founder and culture shaper, I love that title, at Harmonious Leadership. Mohan is known by, and this is again about as cool of a nickname as you're going to have, the Batman of social impact. He's an executive leader by day and a keynote speaker and hip hop artist by night. Throughout his career, Mohan has supported local and national organizations in orchestrating sustainable transformation and system change across corporate social responsibility, education, civil engagement, and philanthropy. He's the founder of Harmonious Leadership, a movement to address the workforce disengagement crisis through cultural change, leadership development, and sustainable impact. Prior to launching Harmonious Leadership, he served as the CEO of Our Turn, a national youth-led organization that closed education opportunity gaps. Mohan was awarded the 40 Under 40 Rising Star by New York Nonprofit Media and a Next Generation Leader by the Human Services Council. His keynote talks and thought leadership are featured by TED, ESPN, the World Economic Forum, Fast Company, Stanford Social Innovation Review, Green Biz. There's many, many more. I'm not going to name them all. And his music has been awarded by the International and USA Songwriting Competitions, and his debut film, In Pursuit Of, received awards from multiple film festivals. This guy's got a lot of going on, and Mohan, we're very happy to welcome you to the podcast today. How are you?
Thank you, Ryan. I'm doing beautiful, especially like hearing just like me doing a lot of stuff in the world.
Right.
It's like I'm not one for being bored.
No, you're not. Clearly.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for having for making the time for us. It's an honor to have you on. Again, because you're a guy who's got a lot going on. Sometimes, we talk to alumni who are just incredibly successful in one kind of narrow lane, right? And then we sometimes have folks like you, and I feel like this is such a Penn State strength, particularly in more recent years. I think so many students come through here and they want to be involved in a lot of different things, and they see opportunities in a lot of different areas. And I think one of the great things about Penn State, right, is the size of it and the scope of it means kind of whatever you want to get involved in, you've got an opportunity to pursue it in some way here. So for starters, I'm curious about your path to Penn State and maybe the opportunities here that kind of set you on the path that you're on now.
Yeah, I think that there's a pretty clear line to what I'm out doing in the world right now, the many things that I'm doing in the world right now, to what I started to dabble in and experience when I was at Penn State. And, I moved around a lot when I was growing up. I'm the son of immigrants. And so what that oftentimes meant for us is like wherever the job opportunity was, like that's where the family went. So we were in the, East Coast, West Coast, in between, lived in India for a couple of years. And then when it came to go into college, I wanted like a true campus experience. I wanted to be on the East Coast. And, kind of long story short on that, landed at Penn State. And it was like this explosion of like sensory experiences and activities and different types of people and backgrounds. And it was just like, it was so exciting. I think was interesting for me is like coming from India, it was an American school where I was there. My graduating class had 50 people. And so like Penn State, you're lucky to be like in a single class, right? With like 50 people, let alone like your entire class of freshmen. But like, I never felt like small in that big sea. Like things felt very accessible for me. And I was just like very excited to go and take it on. And particularly like coming to Penn State, I was at a mode in my life where I felt like it was a time for sort of like a reimagination of who I was. Like I felt like going to India, I was better in touch with my own culture. I felt more confident to be expressive. That led me into things like the Indian Student Association. And then it just like things just grew from there. And again, just about everything that I'm involved in right now has like these initial seeds at Penn State, like, doing this work in social impact and social justice now and movement building. A lot of that ties to minoring in sociology, taking Social 119 with Sam Richards and Lori Mulvey and continuing to stay in touch with them for years after that. Getting on the stage as a musician, as a hip hop artist, like writing music in the dorms to then actually like performing at Alumni Hall and Heritage Hall. Like my love for film, again, like, connecting with friends like over film and culture, that being this like common thread to be able to bring us together than now being a first time filmmaker out in the world. And I can just keep going, and like a lot of times when I talk to folks these days, like when I talk to incoming college students or current college students and they look for advice, well, I tell them is like, just go and try a whole bunch of things. Try a whole bunch of things. If you could maybe get good at a few of them, that'd be amazing. There is no place like college. There aren't many places like Penn State where like you have such an abundance of opportunity and resources, and the stakes are relatively low. So you can try like a million things and like maybe just two of them will hit for you, but then like that's perfect. And like those opportunities have come along, I think quite as often, like at this stage in my life and career. But Penn State was that place. It was like that launching pad in many ways.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. And I think you speak to such a big part of the value of this university, right? Again, the opportunities that's there, the range of opportunity that's there, and the opportunity as an individual to come in and say, you know what, I'm going to try this, maybe it won't work out for me. But like you said, relatively low stakes, right? You're at a point in your life, try something out. It may or may not be the right fit, but you can try a bunch of other stuff too and figure out sort of what excites you and motivates you. I was wondering, as soon as you said sociology, Sam and Lori are friends and neighbors of mine. I took their classes
All right.
longer ago than I should admit. So I love that connection there. Everything that you just mentioned is very, very cool, but then doesn't make me think, oh, this guy was an engineering major. So talk about how you balance all those other interests and what you're doing now with coming through engineering student.
Yeah, again, I kind of talk about like that heritage, that lineage as a son of immigrants, and in particular being the son of South Asian immigrants. And I think folks from a similar cultural background know that you essentially have like three career paths that are put in front of you when you're young. You could be an engineer, you could be a doctor, or you can go into business, or maybe you can go into law, right? So like 3.5. But that's it. And so for me, growing up, like I loved math, I loved science, like I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid, and so it just made sense that I would go into engineering. Penn State being really a top flight school when it comes to engineering, and in particular for me, electrical engineering. And now that said, like my first job out of school was tied to engineering. Like I worked in supply chain management at Procter and Gamble. And I think largely like that didn't come down to like my ability to understand how to wire circuits, which was like some of the coursework that I did, and understanding signals and frequencies. Like I think it was around like the thought process, like the analytical side, the ability to understand many different pathways to be able to solve problems, sometimes to be very agile, to be able to understand systems and how they connect. And fortunately, because I also studied sociology, I was able to understand not just technological systems and manufacturing ones, but people, because people are at the heart of all these different things, right? And so like that kind of continued with me like into this work when I was at Procter and Gamble. But what I'll say is that, I think like a lot of like that critical thinking, analytical thinking disposition is still very much ingrained in me to this day. But it was that people side that started to rise more and more in like what would light me up. Like what is the stuff that would get me excited on Monday morning when I would go into work? And it was understanding people and culture and how institutions would wind up impacting people, and then how together we might be able to drive change, how we might be able to shift a status quo. And that is work that I would do in the manufacturing context. It's work that I would wind up doing in the political context and in many different in between. So yeah, like this progression started to happen, I would say, away from like quote unquote like traditional engineering to the work that I do right now. And like, yeah, like if you put any engineering coursework in front of me right now, I will be pretty clueless. But I think that's partially the beauty of this journey that we're on, is that increasingly it's not linear. And I feel very privileged that I did not have to travel a linear route. And that's thanks to my parents, that's thanks to many of my teachers, my mentors, who like opened up this sense of abundance for me. So that I can be in this place where like I know what it looks like and what it feels like when I'm at my best.
Was there one big jump for you in your career where you sort of committed to, I'm going to kind of pursue a different angle. I'm not going to do what I thought I was going to do, but this is what I think I want to do now?
Yeah, I like the quick backstory. And yeah, there was like a tipping point moment for me, or I should say an inflection point moment, was in my second role when I was at P&G. I was working at a manufacturing site in Connecticut. And this is a site that had been doing good work. Specifically, I was working on the Clairol brand, but the cost was expensive, and maintaining costs and expenses is really critical when it comes to manufacturing and supply chains. And it ultimately came to a point where our site leadership announced that they were going to be closing the site. and displacing over 500 people from their jobs. I was one of the fortunate few who had sort of like a rescue path for me, but not many did. That announcement happened 2 weeks before we were about to launch our annual employee giving and volunteering campaign. And I was going to be leading it. I had supported it the year before, but I was going to be leading it that year. And there were a lot of folks who were like, "Hey, like there's no way we can run a campaign like this when people are worried about putting food on the table." Uh, and that made complete sense. And you could feel that somber energy literally when you would walk through the door like every day at the site. But what I got to thinking was like, what might uplift us? Is it possible for anything to uplift us? And maybe service is the way for that to happen. Like for us to be connected to something bigger, to be connected to one another and the community in which we were operating. And so, I talked to folks across from our site leadership to the folks who are on the manufacturing floor, and there was interest in that. So what we decided to do was actually still run the campaign, but very much double down on the volunteering. Double down on the volunteering. We'll get to the giving part of it later. And so we went out into the community. We had folks from the community come on site. We did mentoring. We did coaching. We did arts and renovation and revitalization. We did a number of different things. And what wound up happening is not only did we catapult our volunteerism, but we actually raised more money that year than we ever had before. And we got an award from the United Way for that. And like that experience told me like you can't underestimate how people will show up for each other and in the community, like almost irrespective of the circumstances. If there is something that is aspirational that they can be a part of, they can see themselves in it, they feel like they can make a positive difference. And I held on to that. I said, I need more of that in my life. And that wound up leading to just a few months later, where it was a crossroads moment where I could stay with P&G, and I had this incredible opportunity to go to the headquarters to play a leading role on one of the biggest brands in the world in external relations, or to kind of go full circle, go back into the space of education, and more specifically to help to find and inspire leaders to be teachers in some of the most underserved communities across the country. And it was the latter in terms of the choice I decided to make. And, that has now it's been like 17 years and I haven't turned back.
Right. You chose the right path, certainly for you.
I hope so. No, I think so.
Pretty clear, seems like at this point.
Yeah.
One of the things that in our outreach ahead of time that you kind of shared and that I think is pretty interesting to me is the idea of evolving mindsets and approaches around leadership, organizational leadership, team leadership, whatever. And I think that touches on a lot of the things that you present and talk about, right? Can you kind of give us a nutshell sense of what that means to you and kind of your view on it and how you approach sharing that with other folks?
All right, absolutely. Well, it's almost cliche or redundant at this point, but I'll note it anyway, in that we're in a moment of massive change in nearly every aspect of our lives. You think about public health and healthcare. You think about politics, civic engagement, the state of democracy. You think about the nature of our culture, and folks continuing to talk about polarization, division, scarcity. Like we can keep going, and there's massive technological change with AI. And so when all these different things are happening, I think historically we have seen a couple of different forces that will show up. There is the force that we generally want, which is how do we lean into our strengths, into our knowledge, our ancestral wisdom, so that we can be able to pursue moonshot goals that can be truly transformative and revolutionary, right? And some of the greatest innovations that have happened in the world have been when you've been able to corral that type of energy. There is also a force of regression. There is a force that is intended to be solid and stable and predictable, which a lot of people want during moments like this, but it doesn't always work that way. And I note that it's regressive because I think we're seeing that today when it comes to models of leadership, where we need to be agile. We need to be as future ready as possible. We need to be as inclusive as possible so that we're bringing the most innovative ideas to the table. And we need to not only be able to have resilience for everything that is to come, because nobody can predict what even 3 months from now will be, let alone 3 years. Not just resilient, but we need to be able to renew. like consistently up level when it comes to our well-being and performance, right? So we need all those things. And yet, what is happening in too many places? From elected officials to corporate leaders to all sorts of folks who are in positions of influence, basically telling folks, hey, because there's so much urgency, you need to work nonstop. You need to just show up in the office and just keep showing up in all the ways that I tell you to. We're going to have a command and compliance environment where you need to tell me everything that you're doing all the time. Get to your vacation later. There are 24 hours in a day, 996, right? We keep hearing about all these different things, and yet we know it doesn't work. Like the data proves that those methods of command and control and compliance and top down, oftentimes hypermasculinity, they do not work. We know it in ourselves as people, as human beings, as leaders. Like that doesn't work, and we shouldn't have to be stuck within a false choice over and over again. And it's a false choice that I have been almost like subjected to, and I'll admit that even in leadership positions, I have subjected other people to it because that was the training and conditioning I received, which is that you can either have your well-being or you can have your performance, but you can't have both. And that is fundamentally flawed, ineffective, broken, and we need to change that. Like we need to be able to meet the moment that we're in and the future that we want to aspire to, where there is greater flourishing economically, socially, in terms of our health, civically, and for future generations, a place where we can do and where we can feel our best. And so that is where I spend my time and energy now in thinking about like, how do we shift that consciousness around leadership so that we not only accept that there is a better model, but that we deserve that better model, that that is what should exist in all institutions. And then we can practice it. Like then we can actually do it.
Do you find that's a hard sell generally, or when you sort of shine a light on it, are people sort of ready to get it once they hear it kind of made the right way?
You know what's interesting is that I'll talk to folks about this a lot, and like the entry point, it's not always the notion of like reimagining leadership, right? So I could be talking to someone in corporate sustainability, and they're thinking about, hey, like we have these very ambitious goals that we need to be able to hit with respect to performance from a business objective standpoint, reporting to our shareholders, but then also when it comes to our climate commitments and our sustainability commitments. And these are so urgent, they're so intense, I can't even think about this leadership development stuff, right? And then you keep the conversation going a little bit, maybe ask the next question of like, so what's holding you up from being able to hit that, right? And then that's when that human side starts to come out. Like it's going beyond the dashboard and the metrics and the strategic plans and the business plans. You start to realize that for like as well written as any of those plans might be, if the person orienting towards that plan, the person who's trying to drive it, is someone who is suffering from burnout, if they are suffering from scarcity, if they feel like they have to choose between their work or their family, if they're carrying all of these different conditions, that plan's not going to go very far. And so when we get to that point in the conversation, that's when I find that suddenly like we've expanded the aperture for what's possible. And now folks are realizing, yeah, like I need to do things differently. I want to do things differently. And what I feel very encouraged by is that like that moment of epiphany is happening like at critical mass and scale, literally all across the world, is that more and more people are recognizing we have to do things differently. It's time for not just like the on offense approach or the on defense approach, but the third way approach. And that's what harmonious leadership is intended to represent, is like, what is that third way? What is something that feels fresh and vibrant? And folks are gravitating towards that increasingly. And I feel that feels very exciting for me. Like I'm excited to see like what kinds of stories of leadership we're going to be talking about 10 years from now. And I don't think they're going to be the ones of the nonstop hustle. I think they're going to be the stories of the people who said, I crafted something different and I'm better for it. My family's better for it. My community's better for it. And my business is better for it.
Yeah. I hope it's an idea that people are open to embracing, because it certainly makes sense, but is easy, I think, for a lot of folks, like in the day-to-day grind, to get caught up in more traditional ways that, like you said, are not going to ultimately be as fulfilling or impactful.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you are a musician. You are now a filmmaker. So it's sort of a two-part question. The first part is, when did those become things that you wanted to pursue just in general? You're a busy enough guy. When did you want to say, hey, I want to make time to be able to make music, to create, to make film? When did that become a thing for you? Was it always there, or was it a more recent thing?
Yeah. Well, I think first off, what was kind of like always there, I guess I could say, is from being a kid. Like I'll never forget like hearing traditional Indian music and tablas in the house, hearing Saturday Night Fever, that soundtrack, hearing Lionel Richie, Michael Jackson. Like this was the soundtrack of my life, and particularly as someone who did bounce around a lot, as I mentioned earlier, like music was a constant for me, and the energy within it, like it was captivating for me. Like that was always like this outlet for expression when I was a kid. Like well before I was doing like keynote speaking and things like that. Like I was in my living room performing along to music videos. Like that's how I saw myself, was like kind of being on those types of stages. I didn't know how it was going to happen when like I was a kid, when I was a teenager, but I started to discover that when I was like at the end of high school and then when I got into college. So music I just kind of continued to carry with me, and I would like I said, like work on it in dorm rooms and just kind of like write for the fun of it, perform for the fun of it. And then when I graduated, like then I got really serious about like trying to just get better at music. Like I wanted to hone that skill and that craft. And I got to this point where then I was a few years into my journey of working full time in the social impact space, and like it was just so intoxicating for me. Like I was just giving me so much fuel, so much energy on a day-to-day basis. I was like, I want more. Like I want to be more expressive. Like I have more stories to share. I have more ideas to share. There's more people I want to connect with. And that brought me back to music. Because music is one of the most powerful forces to break through boundaries and geographies and to be able to bring people together. So it was at that point where I said, I need to make sure that my music is fully representative of this life that I'm on right now. I mean, this trajectory that I'm on right now of working the social impact arena, of trying to be a troublemaker against the status quo, of someone who's still struggling in many ways, like holding many different identities. Like I was still trying to find like who I was at this stage of like being in my early 20s, my mid 20s, and music became the outlet for that. And as I got more and more to this place where I was able to bring down that wall between my personal, like my professional world, I should say, and then my music world, because for the longest time, they were two different identities because I didn't feel safe bringing them together. When I started to take down that wall and it was just one me, like it was one Mohan, like, yes, the artist, the movement entrepreneur, the dad, eventually, the son, the husband, that's when I felt like I was at my level of like fullest expression. And like that fulfillment would be like this catalyst for me to be more creative and to be more expressive through music. And then that wound up leading me into film. Because again, I've talked about this notion of storytelling. Storytelling is like this common thread and energy throughout my life. My parents both are incredible storytellers. Like that is the environment I came up in. I love telling stories now. I love uplifting the stories of others. And with film, I find it to just be like this incredible medium, to not just like center on like the subject, so to speak, within the film, but for it to be like this mirror for people. And that's been like really incredible for me, like with this debut film that I've put out called In Pursuit of, and is centered on my late father. It was intended to be something that memorializes him and his journey and his legacy. But what's been really like remarkable for me is as I've shared it with other people, how much people are reflecting on their own lives, like saying, yes, your dad was inspirational. And it makes me think differently about service. It makes me think differently about immigration. It makes me think differently about my leadership and the legacy that I want to leave behind. And I think that's the power of arts and culture, and film in this case is the power of music. Like when it's at its best, it's something that gives you this new sense of like soul and purpose and reflection. And we just need that so much, I think, in our society today. Like I'm talking about this notion of leadership, and I could continue to talk about it, right? Like I'm planning to write a book about it, right? And I think that's all great and that's powerful, but like true cultural change and narrative shifts have never happened without like the forces of arts and culture behind them. And it just feels like really like fulfilling and like uplifting to me, like almost like on a day-to-day basis, to know that like music and film are just in the bag. Like they're in the bag. I can tap into it at any moment. I don't have to flip a switch anymore. And it took a long time for me to get to that point, but now it just feels very natural and authentic for me.
Yeah, I would think as someone who loves music and appreciates that sense of it being a constant in life, but also I don't have any musical talent. So trying to imagine the jump from there to like it's a thing I want to do beyond just in my room or in my dorm or whatever, to then even go beyond that and tie it into just part of your life and how you work and how you are. That's a very cool leap. And again, like you said, you do have to write a book because that's the other box you got to check off. I think.
Yeah, we got to check that box. We got to check that
Uh,
box. That's in progress.
that's very cool.
Yeah.
So how do you? So the second part of the question then is how do you? Can you talk a little bit about give folks a perspective on how you do tie it into your work today? I guess the music in particular is really what you tie into your day work. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's sort of like an evolving paradigm for me right now. And so music is something that I will infuse into just about everything I do. So for example, I'm doing a keynote to open up a conference next week. And it's with a wide range of corporate professionals, some social impact folks, nonprofit people, some government. Music's going to be a part of it. Because for one, like that's just naturally who I am, but also like music has this ability to wake people up too, right? And there's so many spaces that need that type of spark. So like I won't like only do like a keynote, like a quote unquote like traditional keynote. Like music will always be a part of that. I could be hosting an event, like it could be a webinar, and there's going to be a musical element to it. Like it could be like the intro music, it could be some sort of an icebreaker where we're asking people about their musical influences. Like we're just going to continue to bring that forward and credit off, I would say in many ways, to the young people that I worked with in my last role, leading an organization called Our Turn, where I was working with high schoolers, I was working with college students, and like they didn't see that gap. And I think that's the power, I think, of today's leaders, like today's generation of leaders, is that the way that I came up, with that line, that wall in between, like they if they even see the wall, like they break it down, right? Like it doesn't exist. Like there is congruence that is there. And so like we would infuse music into so many different types of experiences and activations, sometimes formal, sometimes informal. And what I'm evolving into, like I said, like there's like some shift for me now. I'm working on a new project. I'm working on a new album that I'm hoping to be able to release, hopefully this year. We'll see how that plan all goes. And music for me, it still continues to be this intention of being the soundtrack of the times. And we're in a moment where like we need that musical representation to be able to bring us together, to help us to express those emotions and feelings that are within us that are maybe stuck. But what I'm also thinking about is like, how can we democratize that access when it comes to music? And what I mean by that is like, knowing how powerful and effective it is, it shouldn't be like a niche thing that you have to take a class to be immersed in, or that maybe you happen to catch this one crazy guy from Sri Lanka with glasses who happened to infuse a little bit of music into a keynote. Like it should be everywhere, right? Like, and we, as lovers of arts and culture, right? Like I think we need that, we deserve that. So that's what I'm starting to think about now is like, how do we democratize that access where like you're putting together a campaign, you're putting together an initiative, you're putting together an event, you're cultivating community. How can you get to the music that you need that helps to uplift, that helps to spark the next thing, as opposed to a lot of times it's an afterthought and maybe it's forgotten and people are like, oh, I wish I had like a soundtrack or a playlist. And I think we can be actually much more innovative than just trying to pull a random Spotify playlist, so that the music again is like integral to the type of effects and positive changes that we're trying to create. So that's kind of like where my mind is at now. Like there is my own creation and expression of music, but then also how do we democratize that access to artists all across the world, particularly the ones who are typically under the radar, but could really be these incredible forces to catalyze change across many different sectors.
So my follow up to that was sort of what's next? What haven't you done yet? But you kind of got to a lot of that, right? When you look at your career and your public life, professional life, and the ways you've already evolved, do you feel like you've sort of found the lane that you want to stay in now, or is that evolution sort of seem inherently like how you're always going to operate? You know what I mean? Do you feel like 10 years from now we might be having a very different conversation of what you've been doing for the past 10?
Yeah. I think it's kind of like all the above, to tell you the truth. I feel like I have a much greater sense of, what lights me up at this point. I love co-creating with people. I continue to love shaking the status quo. I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of community and to foster a sense of community. I continue to believe in collective impact as opposed to individualized impact. I think that's the only way that we really drive transformative change in this world. So those elements are very true for me. There is like this ever expanding sense of what wellness looks like in my life, uh, which like sometimes is traditional, like quote unquote traditional, like vacation and the arts and time with my family, and then there's stuff that's like untraditional, right? Like conversations like this, maybe like you may not put it in a wellness box, but like to me, like this is well-being, like having these types of engagements and conversations. So like I'm ever expanding and ever evolving what that looks like for me in my life. But what I'll say is like what's really clear for me now at this stage is like this notion of, when I was coming up in college in some ways early on in my career, like I'll admit I wanted to be the guy. Like I wanted to be the guy. Um, I felt like I had the skills, the capabilities, in some cases, the authority to be the one to be like, hey, like, here's where we need to go. Hop on my back. I'm going to put on the cape and we're going to get this thing done. And then I took a lot of hits. I took a lot of arrows. I had some great mentors around me who helped to straighten me out. And I'm at this place now in my life and career where I don't want to be the king anymore. I want to be the king maker. Like I want to think about how can I ensure that some of these tables where there are resources and power and influence that have been so hard for folks like me to be able to get access to, that even when you get access, sometimes you're not heard, people don't pay attention to you, they dismiss you. How can I ensure that the next person who steps into that room has it easier than I did? Like that is the most critical thing for me right now. Like, how can I help to pave that way? How can I uplift the voices and stories of people who typically are not heard, but who hold immense inspirational power and aspirational power? And if we hear their stories, we will be motivated enough to jump onto wherever they are going, like whatever train or rocket ship they are heading on. And so, like that, sometimes that is music, right? It's uplifting through music, it's uplifting through film, it's uplifting through events, through many different forms of storytelling, like really building like this vast ecosystem of these folks who need to be heard right now, because I think that we're so hungry for that type of hope in our society right now. And I refuse to believe that the negativity that we see in the media is actually the truth of what's happening in communities today. Because I think the truth of what's happening in communities is actually far more positive. I think we're seeing bridge building every day. We are seeing resolution every day. We are seeing reconciliation every day. We are seeing like, true like liveliness and exuberance and effervescence every day. It's like, how can we like shift the microphone and the camera lens in that direction? Like that's where I want to be. And so maybe 10 years from now, if we're having this conversation, like maybe like I'm a part of some new and unique ways that that's happening. Like maybe it started through harmonious leadership. Maybe it's in different spaces. But like I'm really excited for like I think that level of emergence.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I think again, interesting to hear you say like you used to think you had to be the man, and evolving to the point where you're still getting satisfaction and finding the time that you're spending and the work you're putting in to be rewarding, but it's not about you at the end of the day. I think is a great lesson there for folks. You're ultimately trying to uplift others, and that's engaging you and making you happy along the way. So. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I think that's everything I have, man. I really appreciate your time on this. Great to talk to you. Great to hear again this kind of unique path that you're carving out in the world, and the impact that you're having and looking to continue to have. So I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And I want to thank everybody else for joining in today as well on our latest episode, and hope to see everyone soon. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.